talks about the practice model. Now, this is a model that the Australian Childhood Foundation have provided largely for schools, looking at children and developing a framework for working with them. And this practice environment, as it's called, tries to create a sense of predictability in a child's routines, connect the children to relationships with peers and adults who are supportive and consistent, keep children calm, build child's memory and cognitive functions as a way of them understanding their experiences of abuse and the effects of it, contain and influence children's behaviour associated with fear, anger, shame and disconnection, and support children to shape their internal emotional reactions. So that the letters of the word practice cover the key areas. So the areas are P for predictable, so that's an environment that's familiar as possible and feels safe. R is for responsive, so we respond to children's behaviour, responses to children's behaviour should always stem from an understanding of the trauma-based origins of that behaviour. A is attuned, so the more we're attuned to a child's patterns and also their patterns or their processes of responding, the better we're able to understand them and help them understand their own reactions. Because ultimately, they need to recognise these patterns that they have and learn to self-manage. That may take a long time. As was talked about here, even learning about developing an individual learning plan for a child with trauma may take years. And so this learning is slow, and that's the difficult part for carers. It's a difficult process, but I think with a better understanding of what's behind the behaviours, we're more able then to be effective with these children and not re-trigger them and also not create more stress for ourselves. The C, number 4, is connecting, and it's about implementing strategies that build emotional literacy. Now, emotional literacy is children understanding feelings and developing a vocabulary of feeling words. Because when we express feelings, we process them and they dissipate. So it's important for a lot of these children, because they're so stressed a lot of the time, there's no connection with emotions. And we're trying to teach them a connection with emotions. And the first step in that often is, what's the feeling? What's the physical feeling? And what emotion are we attaching to it? And what I talked to you before about doing a chronology of the day can involve then them talking about feelings in situations as well. And starting to become more accurate in understanding feelings, developing a vocabulary of feeling words and being able to express them. The translating largely relates to the children's understanding of their trauma. So children who've experienced trauma struggle to build stories of understanding because of the impact of the trauma. So they often need what we call a translator to assist them to process, of recalling and remembering. So in some ways we act as a translator, and the translator may be, you had your visit with mum and dad. I'm thinking that you said that you got a bit scared during the visit, and I think that Dad's voice being raised was triggering for you. And that made you scared, and then you closed down for a while. So what I'm trying to do is translate. This is what's happened. I'm trying to translate so you understand what's happened and why. So we play that translatory process. The translation might also be, I know earlier on when I told you that we weren't going to the shop at 4 o'clock and you got really aggressive, I think something triggered for you then. And I think perhaps it was building and I didn't notice it. Because the other thing that comes with the issue of shame is so significant for kids with trauma, because often they're behaving in a really inappropriate way. They're not able to, often been unable to talk about it. And so what comes with bad behaviour is a sense of shame. And it's important for us when a child does act out is in some ways to be restorative afterwards as well. And restorative might be to say, we're okay. You're safe here. You're not leaving this place. We've got to, and also that I'm not going to continue to be angry with you or cold with you about stuff. We may have a consequence of a behaviour, but it's trying to prevent a sense of shame, because shame feeds into this negative self-image, which means they're more likely to be overreactive to situations and more easily triggered. The involving is trying to assist the children in having relationships with their peers. Because it's knowing that one of the key factors in this training is knowing that relationships are healing for kids with trauma. The more they have relationships, the more stable they get, the less likely they are to be triggered, the more positive they feel about themselves and others. The C is for calming, which is trying to facilitate positive outcomes for these children. We need to support them in finding ways to be calm and to be able to be consistent with that and practice that. They need to be able to self-regulate, and we need to work out techniques for that. So for some children, there's a child I'm working with at the moment who, I think it's a mixture of trauma and attachment, but she flips her lid very, very easily, and she's been out of class. She's in about grade 5, and she's been out of class a lot because she gets aggressive, because she's so reactive to the slightest negative statement made by one of her peers, and she'll throw things and puts other children at risk. But what we worked on initially is a number system of arousal. So what number are you? And if they're in a moderate state, so what do we need to do about it? What we're trying to do there is help them to sort of recognise their arousal, use that as a feedback to other people like the teacher. So the teacher might say, where are we today? The carer might come in and say, look, I need to let you know she's at an 8 at the moment. Okay, thanks for that information. Or it might be that the teacher has a relationship with the child where they're able to get some feedback on where their arousal's at. And then it's assisting the child or having strategies yourself to bring their arousal down. And for some kids, especially initially, asking about feelings is just too overwhelming for them. But asking for a number is a safer place to start with. But it's trying to engage them more in strategies for what to do about it. So if I'm an 8 or a 9, then the strategy might be, I need to go outside and have some space for a while away from people, because I'm either going to feel threatened or I'm going to get aggressive and hurt someone. And then when my arousal is down, I'll come back into the class. But for that to occur, the teacher needs to have a mechanism for that. We need to already have discussion around, okay, what can the child do? Does someone need to go with the child? How do they come back into the class without feeling ashamed or threatened or anything like that? So it needs to be worked on to work as well, and it needs the teacher's engagement with that. And the last letter is engaging, which is building supportive adult-child relationships. So it's also making them aware, it's you being aware, what other adults in this child's life can I see as key adults that are also going to try and engage with the child, understand their trauma, and for them to develop more child-adult relationships. So they need to develop child-adult relationships as well as peer relationships. And they're not going to do that without a great deal of assistance from us, and they're not going to do that without the adult being very skilled up on the child's issues and actively engaging in it, and probably being aware of this stuff as well. But all of those things assist the child in stabilising, bringing their arousal down, being able to engage, learning, and being less triggered by a whole range of issues that might cause a traumatic response.